Okay, hello again, everybody. So, following from the last video regarding the distinction between detachment and dissociation, something else I wanted to discuss as a follow on from that is the idea that nothing actually needs to be done here. And I think it impinges upon something that I've been meditating upon for the past few years regarding entropy. And in the last video, I would mention that beings that want to maintain their form within this distortion is a distinction. But I think to expand upon that concept, we have to talk about duality, and the duality specifically within a demiurgic reality system. So in this ideal state that you would call the all, I've the Gnostic people described it as a somewhat pleroma, which was secondary to a thing called the monad, which is this incomprehensible sort of epistemological, which basically means the study and the nature, origin, scopes of human knowledge, and ontological, which is basically the study. It's a branch of metaphysics, which is the study of the nature of being and existence. This monad is a epistemological and ontological singularity. It's deductive logic's end of the line of reasoning, whereas deductive logic is a sequential form of reasoning, such that B follows A and C follows B, whereas inductive reasoning is more about the inference of pattern through breadth, and it's inference via correlation instead of deduction. So they talked about this monad, which is basically the end of the line of causal reasoning, and thus emanating from that you have a thingamajig called a pleroma, which to my mind was their whole embodiment of the idea of something, because first Hermetic principle is saying that everything is mind, and the original conclusion that basically formed the idea was that if you are God, if you are the all, then you couldn't create as a copy of yourself, because that would be something less than yourself, which is infinity. You couldn't reproduce of yourself, because that is something that's not infinity. However, you can imagine something, and this comes from the as above so below principle, in the same way that we can do that. Therefore, you have this notion of a pleroma, which is the best, in my opinion, that humans could come up with in order to encapsulate the emanation of this singularity, the monad. Now, we haven't particularly reached the distortion yet, the demiurgic domain yet, but in this state you do have concepts. You have, I wouldn't say distinction or duality, because I confine that to the demiurgic domain, but you do have ideas, you do have mentality, you have, they sort of defined these things called aeons, which are just different ideal aspects of the human consciousness, and through which the aeons had complementary aspects to them. So Sophia, the original aeon that decided to create, singularly by herself without her male consort birthed the demiurge. But the whole thing with her and having a consort is that within the pleroma there's no such thing as distinction or duality per se. They're one in the same thing. So therefore, when you create this creation of the demiurge is it's impartial of who she was. It's without her fullness. That's why it was said that she created in ignorance, because it's basically part of herself, a consort, and the aeon is essentially an emanation or one particular aspect of this monad, and each aeon is not a separate piece of the monad. Each aeon is a different expression of the monad, but it contains the fullness. It contains the whole identity and principle of the monad. So it's not like this place where when something's created, you imagine something, but it couldn't be in the fullness of detail. You can't imagine a world in your mind and have it have full resolution of the physical domain that hosts the human's physical mind. That doesn't happen in these domains outside of the demiurgic worldview. Got a bug on my arm. One sec. Let's blow it off. So it's essentially that's where it comes into the idea that, towards, so the pleroma, you can think of it as being synonymous with the monad. It's just that the pleroma encapsulates human mentation. It's the point at which we could conceive, whereas the monad is inconceivable to the human mind. It's an alien entity, but it's also, if you know where your true origin is, you understand that it's also you at the same time. But then again, that's also part of the contradictory aspects of being incarnate within this particular distorted form of the human. So then if we now want to sort of define the distinction and the duality of this place, I've noticed that the inversion of the original demiurgic principle is that of a creation of ignorance, and we can see that it seems like the suffering caused on the biological level, and I suppose through all levels, in fact, not just the biological level, is caused by this a potentiality, a difference, a duality. So in biological systems, you have to consume other life forms in order to steal their chemical potentials, such that you can create chemical potentials within your own body, and that's stored as glucose, which then gets converted to ATP via the mitochondria to be used for various chemical processes and as such metabolism, such that various amino acids can be reconfigured to create the morphogenetic form of the organism, which is guided via the blueprints of DNA. But you always see that these biological potentials are never self-sustaining. They never contain the monad in and of themselves. They always lack something. And then that goes into why, you see throughout all levels of the demiurgic reality, this constant hunger, a hunger that can never be satiated. And it's a real problem. So then But then what you find is that embedded within the DNA, there's this propensity towards the reproduction, because there is this there is a singularity that's been embedded within life in and of itself, and we see it especially amalgamized as within the human mind as this spiritual and technological singularity that is in the opposite direction of the singularity of the monad. It's this idea throughout known history, and even throughout the entire history of the species, that humans, or thus reality itself, will create technology, will advance, will create spiritual progression, will step towards this utopian idea. And it's an abstract form because no one can completely define what that means. But what it is it's more efficiency within the direction of this duality, within this capacity to more to increase the propensity of these biological potentials. That's also seen within the psychic domain, in the sense that souled entities want to live forever. They want to maintain their identity. The Hylics, the NPCs, the biological entities here, they want to live forever via the perpetuation of their genes. But because of the flawed state and the entropic so the entropic pull, which is trying to pull all chemical potentials, all biological entities towards this zero state, this state of equilibrium, which is actually the pull of the pleroma / the monad, in my opinion. It wants to dissolve all form. But we see within the biological drive towards this negative singularity, this utopian singularity, that we age and the DNA degrades with time as entropy affects it. The telomeres, which are the end parts of the DNA strand, degrade as they get perpetually replicated, and mutations occur, and or they get destroyed via radiation and what have you. And then we experience aging, and then eventually the organism can't keep replicating cells because supposedly you're no less than 6 years old. It's just new cells, and what's left behind is the information of supposedly who you are in the form of of an ego, at least on the biological level. You age and you eventually die. But then the point I'm making here is that the demiurge tries to copy the print. In its ignorance, it has to subjugate the divine creative energy of Sophia via reproducing the original non-dual conditions, and thus for biology to perpetuate itself, reproduction has to take place. The male and female aspects of embodiment have to come together in the form of sexual reproduction to recombine and splice the DNA to create a new combination, and thus the birthing process occurs. And I guess that also happens within the soul psychic domain as well. So the point is that this is just going to keep going on and on and on. And I think the thing that the whole we know on the societal cultural level, the human level, that this is going to keep going on. And what you find is that this attractor towards entropy is going to be the leveling force in the end, because you always find that via there's always some kind of corruption. There's because of this cannibalistic mindset that the demiurge believes is the only thing in existence, because it's been, it's been created out of ignorance, and it doesn't know its higher spiritual origin. It doesn't know where it comes from. It believes that it's God. We always find this corruption, as all organisms embody the demiurgic principle, which is that the demiurgic principle wants to be a god in and of itself. It believes it's God, and it believes that everything outside of itself is inconsequential and is subject to it. That's why you get this corruption. You get this selfishness, or people just think about yourself, and you think to yourself, well, why do they act in this way? Why do they act in a way which causes the entire economy, say like fractional reserve banking, and basically printing to inflate the money supply, such that it's causing this this rush to go nowhere fast of everybody. You get most people who are at the bottom, who are just generating value for shareholders, and you get this whole parasitical hierarchical structure. People who at the top, who seem to have the least spiritual inclination, getting rewarded by the reality system, because that's basically the demiurge principle. It's all about myself. It doesn't really matter about the organism as a whole, because I'm God, and the only thing that really matters is my own perpetuation, my genes, my bloodline. Fuck everything else. And you do get the embodiment of the monad, the pleroma, in this place, but it's suffocated because it can't be contained by the inverted reality system, or the reality system rewards essentially this bad behavior, but it's all futile, it's all in vain. It can't be sustained. It's no matter how hard it tries, this attractor towards entropy always wins in the end. So in the case with biology, the case with humans supposedly having an ego, it's going to cause some great technological catastrophe, which is going to wipe out the species. That's what I think. And then you'll be resulted back to the biology, but the biology will eventually fizzle out. I think this also explains the Fermi paradox, because the Fermi paradox is that a notion that we've not been contacted by alien species within the physical domain, but I think that any alien species that comes to some level of enlightenment ends up seeing that it's futile, and then they peacefully go extinct and return to where they came from, which is a place of fullness. It is not this place of distinction, of separation, of duality, where they understand that there's an attractor towards entropy, and this is the natural state of the universe, this 0 point energy, this place of formlessness, where there's no struggle against this attractor, there's no suffering caused by that. They also aren't scared of delusionment into formlessness, because they understand that just because there's formlessness doesn't mean that existence doesn't matter, and whatever that monad is the best attempt of a thing to try to imagine what no thing is. And no thing doesn't mean non-existence. And in this form, because entities are made out of the substance, at this stage, my physical brain is confined via the material reality. And in the same way that video games are produced in a lower pixelated resolution state, such that it doesn't embody the graphics of the physical reality, in that same way, this mind-body my language, my ego, can't fully explain what nothing is. However, if you have a connection to the nothing, to the place of fullness, where there's no insatiable hunger, you understand that the fullness of knowledge, which is this gnosis, the fullness of that is fully available, because if that is what you really are, and you never came into this place, this is an echo. This is a projection, a fractal projection. So there's nothing to worry about gaining some kind of knowledge here, because when you die, you're freed from the constraints of the body. The fullness of knowledge comes into view. There's no even need, because the same thing applies to the soul. It doesn't matter. Look, I'm experiencing my five senses as it is, but that's not actually who I am. It's happening. The soul exists within this domain where there's possibly like hundreds of thousands of incomprehensible levels to this, and there's various incorporeal beings, because it's all form, it's all this demiurgic principle, it's all beings that are trying to combat entropy and to become universes in and of themselves. And these entities that afflict the soul, they're trying to do the same thing as well. And like this feeding off of suffering, supposedly, it's the same thing as what these parasites do in the physical domain, the people who basically control the entire economic system. They're all trying to live forever as form, but entropy is the leveling force. Entropy will cause everything to come to a zero state, so there's nothing to do here. The best thing that can be done is to repeat and rehearse information that's already been known for thousands of years, because the beings who are here, the Christ essence that has a direct connection to gnosis, exists throughout non-linear time. So you get echoes of the same knowledge just being rehashed into a different format. And I guess that's part of the intention that I have with this channel, to just rehash what has been expressed throughout non-linear time, to understand that you never actually came into this place to begin with, because you know where you come from, and that's gnosis. Thank you. That's all I had to say. Okay, so I was just on my way back. There was one more thing that I thought of that I forgot to mention. So there's the concept of this attractor towards entropy, which is going to basically bring all dissonance, demiurgic dissonance, from the state of equilibrium back to that point of equilibrium eventually. And suffering seems to be largely contributed via beings striving to be distinguished entities in dualistic states and self-contained universes, basically containing the demiurgic principle of being the supreme creator in and of itself, separate to everything else. So because it is the supreme creator, then the totality of everything else doesn't matter. Then you see that within how these extraterrestrials in the soul domain act, and how basically all these selfish, unconscious people who control the world seem to act as well. But so yeah, there's the contention, the suffering. You have to acquire money. You have to consume food, consume other organisms in order to maintain your differential, your duality against the attractor towards entropy. But then you might think to yourself, well, what if there were, because what if it is possible to have embodiment? What if it is impossible to not be absorbed into this monad? So then you might think, okay, well, maybe there are conditions within the universe where the attractor of the universe is what you are essentially made out of. So in this case, what if you, within this realm, what if the conditions for your existence was to be a being of entropy, with the universe being an attractor towards entropy? You might think, okay, you can exist as an entity there, and there would be no suffering, because the very essence of what's required for you to be is what the universe is tending towards. And I think maybe that that might be a slight description of what the pleroma is, in as far as, because I guess the pleroma doesn't really exist. It's more of like a concept within the human mind, in as far as you can conceptualize the monad. But what actually ends up happening is, because that distinction, which enables you to have a personality in that kind of universe, causes you to become merged and causes you to enter that symbiotic state, because the state of your being is the substance that the universe is being attracted towards, so you end up becoming merged anyway. So I think that's just an addendum that I wanted to add onto this video here, because some people, I suppose, might think that the conditions for embodiment is possible, but you just need a different rule set, when in actuality you end up being merged anyway within those conditions. So the embodiment aspect just doesn't make sense, at least in as far as I can figure out. So that's it for now. Thank you. Bye bye.